Welcome to the stage, the director of the Institute for the Study of Energy and Our Future, Nate Hagens.
Good to see everyone. If anyone wants to know what happens when you have a lot of ashwagandha and a lot of caffeine, you're about to find out. I woke up at 5 a.m. this morning, which was about the same time the big bass beats in my dream stopped. I woke up because I was a little nervous about how to open this session, because I've spent 20 years compiling what I'm about to present to you, and we live in a chaotic and uncertain world, and I've spent this time assembling this story that is science tethered, but it's intense. Yesterday, I met a guy named David Rock, who's a neuroscientist from Australia. I'm going to do a podcast with him on Tuesday, and he's a specialist in positive psychology and how to change people in a positive way. And he said the formula is you start with something positive, and then a negative, and then you end with a positive. So I had to find something positive to start with. So I'm going to tell the story of how I even got here. So 20 years ago, I was managing money for billionaires, high net worth individuals at Salomon Brothers on Wall Street, and one of my clients started trading oil futures, and it was my responsibility to learn about that subject. I didn't know anything about it. And I discovered that oil was incredibly powerful for what it provides humans, orders of magnitude more than its market price. I discovered that it's going to peak and decline in availability in my lifetime. And I discovered that the pollution and the negative externalities that come from burning it are not included in our prices. And I became so obsessed with that I quit. I gave my clients their money back. I took my golden retriever in a backpack full of books and traveled in Canada for a year. And then eventually went and got my PhD in ecological economics. And since then, I've been assembling the scientific synthesis that I'm going to present to you. And here's the positive story. I'm doing this because I want to pass the baton to more pro-social, pro-future humans to play a role in our collective future. And there are some people here in the audience that flew here only to see me and to talk to me. And these people came up to me, and not only did they say that they've listened to every single episode of my 150 episodes on my podcast. They've changed their business models. They're venture capitalists. They're doing things more in service of life from a systems perspective. And they also said that they love me, but they never met me. They just came to that conclusion from listening to hundreds of hours of me online. And so this is why I'm doing this work, is I want to pass the baton to more people to integrate the aerial picture of humanity in the 21st century in their own lives, in their work, in our nation, in our world. There's a quote by James Baldwin: "Not everything that can be faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced," and that is my philosophy. So I'm going to go through a whirlwind presentation of 300 slides in the next 80 minutes or so. And I also have to call out Will Dias. Where's Will in the audience? Will runs an organization called Deckcraft, and until 2 months ago, my presentation was like an island of misfit toys. And Will and his team created what you're about to say. And so if you need help with your PowerPoints, please reach out to Will. So here's an outline of what I'm going to talk about. A brief introduction. I'm going to talk about the human ecosystem, the economic superorganism, which we're all a part of, implications and scenarios, and what to do at various scales. Okay, so all of you and all humans are really simultaneously wearing three hats. You generally want to do well in your job, pursue cultural status, financial success. But you also have other hats. You want to live a good life and have a good family in your community. And you also want to do the right thing for the planet and the future of our Earth and other ecosystems. The problem is this job, your boss, your company, your pursuit dominates and separates us from wearing all three hats at the same time, which I think all of us want to wear all of these hats. So in order to diagnose the problem that we face in the world, we have to understand the patient. In order to understand the future, we first have to understand the present. And most of us don't. Most of our institutions don't. And that's what the next hour plus is going to be about. So we have two predominant cultural narratives. One is a Green New Deal, 100% renewables, work towards zero emissions. On the other side, we have business as usual. Nothing's wrong with the past model. There are no shortages of anything. We need to deregulate and reduce taxes. And I should say that last week we had an election in the United States, and I have not changed a single slide in this presentation. So this is a nonpartisan, apolitical, science-tethered presentation that is true no matter who would have won last week. But with these two predominant narratives, a system synthesis, which I'm going to unpack, tells a much different story than those two narratives. So we live in a world where our culture rewards reductionist experts on all different topics, but they're so siloed and they rarely talk to each other. And the result is we live in a world of islands of expertise separated by oceans of incoherence. That wasn't supposed to be funny, but I'm happy you laughed because there's not much laughter coming ahead. So what we're talking about here is moving from narrow boundary thinking to wide boundary thinking. And that entails thinking about the world, not in terms of things, but in terms of connections. From a linear worldview to a circular one, from silos to emergence, from parts to wholes, from analysis to synthesis, and from isolation to relationships. Okay, so with that backdrop, here is the human ecosystem overview. Humans, historically, present, and in the future, we have ideas. We use energy and materials to develop technology. We represent the flow of that by dollars or euros or renminbi. And we do this all to get the same emotional states of our successful ancestors, and the whole process produces pollution and waste. So I'm going to talk about these things each in sequence. Let's talk about this part first. Energy. Our culture misunderstands the centrality of energy to our economic system and to our futures. Energy is primary in our economies. We need energy to invent, to mine, to manufacture, to create, to deliver, to repair, to maintain, to dispose of. We need energy at every single juncture of every item that contributes to GDP. There are no exceptions. The average home in the United States has 60 devices plugged in 24/7, drawing down electricity. We don't think of that much because energy is so cheap, but energy is part of us, all around us, all the time. Look at this room. Look at how we got here. So here's me on my farm. I do the work about 1/10 of a horse on a good day. This is my actual horse, Binga, who does the work of one horse. This is my utility vehicle with some gasoline. It does the work of 45 horses. And this is my truck that, with some diesel fuel, can do the work of 300 horses. The planes that brought you here have the power density of 100,000 invisible horses pulling that plane across the sky. So we don't think about this, but 1 barrel of oil contains 5.7 million British thermal units worth of energy. And if you translate that into work potential, it's about 1,700 kilowatt hours of work. 1 barrel of energy does around 4.5 years of mine or any of you's physical labor, and right now we're paying $70 for it. So the world economy today uses 100 billion barrel of oil equivalents of coal, oil, and natural gas that are the labor equivalent of 450 billion human workers added to the real work by around 5 billion really human workers. We don't talk about this. I have a master's in finance from one of the best business schools in the country. They never mentioned the word energy once. So this is really the story of industrialization, where we added vast amounts of incredibly cheap fossil energy to machines to do tasks that humans used to do manually or with draft animals. Now, this is a very important graph, so I'm going to spend a little time on it. The story of industrialization is adding large amounts of energy to replace human tasks. I live in Wisconsin, so it's a dairy state, and if you milk a cow, it takes around 30 minutes to milk a cow by hand, and in this model, you make $5 an hour. Or you can add an intermediate parlor machine where you're doing 180 times more energy in electricity and the embodied machinery, and you take a lot less time to milk a cow, but you make $20 an hour instead of $5 an hour. Or you make more profits for the owner, or the consumers in the world have cheaper milk, or any combination. Or you could have a fully automated milking machine that spends 2 minutes per cow milking. There's hardly any human input, and it uses 400 times more energy, and then your wages go up to $25. This is a story of many processes in our world where we're adding this energy to machines to give us all these monetary benefits. Okay, so the green bars here are the same as the prior chart. But what happens when we increase energy from 5 cents to 10 cents to 15 cents? Well, in the hand milking example, nothing happens because there's no external energy. In the intermediate example, you start to lose your profits a little bit as energy gets more expensive. But, and very importantly, in the highly energy intense processes, a tripling of energy prices, because we use so many thousands of units of fossil energy to replace 1 unit of human labor, you have a massive reduction in profits when energy prices double, and you're actually operating at a loss when energy prices triple. You can see this happening in Europe after the Ukraine war. A lot of chemical and industrial facilities had to close down because of this phenomenon. So if we think about the benefits of this fossil energy, it's increased wages in our world, increased profit, it's lowered the price of goods, and it's boosted the number of people and the average economic growth per people. Many of you are aware that we are along the top of this curve. We now have 8 billion humans. It was not that long ago we had under 1 billion humans. What you might not be aware of is this is the global per capita GDP. The average American today is 50 times more materially wealthy than the average human was 200 years ago. And if you combine these two statistics, number of people times consumption materially of people, the global economy is 1,000 times bigger than it was 5 centuries ago. So in business school, they teach you that $1,000 worth of energy is worth $1,000 worth of cupcakes or mezcal or bike helmets or what have you. But the reality is that energy is far more impactful on GDP and our economies. So this is still a model that's taught in Econ 101 around the world. And by the way, there's 240 million college students in the world that still, when they go through Econ, they're learning this. The standard model is there's households, people that demand things. They send signals to the firms who develop them, and there's this virtuous circle between households and firms called the circular economic model. What this model neglects is the source of where the inputs are coming, the non-renewable energy and materials into the flow, and the sink, which is the pollution that is not included in the price of our things. We conflate the dollar value of energy with the work value that it provides us, and we don't include the cost of pollution at all in most cases. We as a culture have become energy blind to this reality. So we're all alive, though we don't really realize it, during what one day may be called the carbon pulse, which is this few hundred-year period where humans are drawing down ancient hydrocarbons millions of times faster than they were trickle-charged, sequestered by photosynthesis and geological processes. Zooming in to 1,000-year, it might look something like this. We're all alive somewhere between the yellow star and the red star. From a climate perspective, we hope we're at the red star. From an economic security, comfort, convenience, growth standpoint, we hope we're at the yellow star. I don't know where we are there. I think we're closer to the red star, which I'll talk about a little later. So there are two narratives when it comes to oil. The United States right now is the largest oil producer in the world, slightly over Saudi Arabia and Russia. Drill, baby, drill. We hit a peak in 1970, 40-year decline, and then technology overcame limits, and we made a new high, and now we're making new highs again. The same graph is shown with different colors, that there's 4 different pools of oil. One, the green is the lower 48 Beverly Hillbillies type oil. The yellow is Alaska, the North Slope, which isn't even contiguous to the United States. It's a different province. The blue is not on land, it's in the Gulf of Mexico. And the red is tight oil, shale oil, which comes from the source rock, which is where all the other oil migrated from. There's nothing left after that. Shale oil depletes at 80% in the first 18 months, and then you need to drill more and more just to stay in place. This is called the Red Queen effect. If for environmental reasons, for financial reasons, for political reasons, the United States stopped drilling oil today, our production would decline 37% in the first year and another 25% in the second year and onwards. So we have to keep drilling to stay in place. The gray here shows the decline profile of all of the oil wells drilled in the United States, well, 88% of them, before 2014. The orange is the profile of the additions in 2014, et cetera, up until 2021, the blue. And what ends up happening is the slope of our total production is declining rapidly, which means we have to run faster. This is a recent chart from ExxonMobil showing where we are today in 2024. And this is their forecast for oil, a 15% average decline rate in the world of all the wells in the world if we do nothing. So there's investments and new discoveries which are projected. But this is not some fringe person saying this. This is Exxon agreeing that depletion never stops. So with respect to technology and depletion, there is a complex relationship. What we've done with shale technology is effectively make a larger straw to get us more out of the top of the straw, but it's like when you're drinking a milkshake, you don't know you're near the bottom until you hear the slurping sound. And so what shale technology has done is, yes, it has found a little bit more oil, but the major impact it's had is just to get out what was there faster. Okay, what about renewable energy? What about other energy other than oil, even though oil is the master resource now? Energy fungibility is how interchangeable energy is with another type of energy. So let's talk about renewable energy. There's no such thing as renewable energy. The sun is renewable, the wind is renewable, but solar panels and wind turbines need to be rebuilt every 20 or 30 years with complex machinery and neodymium magnets. They are no more renewable than a pickup truck. An oak tree is renewable if you can find an acorn. A chicken is renewable if you find another chicken. But renewable energy is a misnomer. It is rebuildable. Secondly, renewable energy, which is great, and I'm in favor of it, and it is growing, is only 20% of global energy use. The other 80% is transportation, heating, liquid fuels, other things. So some things we can replace and turn electric. Other things we can't. Other things will cost much more. So there's a mismatch between a square peg and a round hole sort of thing when we try to change the type of energy. Our entire story about the future and technology is based on our historical experience that energy has always been available and will continue to be. Every single year other than the 1930s, the two world wars, 2009 and 2020 with COVID, we had more energy available than the year before. And at some point that won't be the case. And so what role will technology have once we crest the peak of the carbon pulse? Technology will have to do a lot more for us. And as I said before, as energy prices increase, it has ripple effects through all the industries in the world that are very energy intensive. If we, for some reason, decided to care about climate as a world and decided the answer was electric vehicles because that would reduce oil demand, that would be an incorrect assumption. At least an absolute incorrect assumption, because gasoline demand would go down for sure, and it is going down a little bit. But gasoline is one of 6,000 products that come from a barrel of oil. There's plastics, there's propane, there's paint, there's medical devices and condoms and medicines and Green Bay Packer football helmets and all kinds of things that come from a barrel of oil. And unless we reduce the demand for those things as well, switching to EVs alone will not meaningfully reduce the amount of oil that we extract. And so far, the energy transition that we talk about has not occurred. So far, there has been no green revolution. There's only been a green addition. These are the types of energy that the human economy globally have used over the last 200 years. The green on the bottom is biomass and wood. Today we are using more biomass for energy and wood and heat than we were before we found coal. So all these things, the fossil fuel, the brown, the black, and the blue, are added on top, and the renewables are in the solar and other renewables are in the yellow and red at the very top. They are growing faster than fossil fuels. But fossil fuels are also hitting all-time highs. Not oil yet. Oil peaked in 2018 as of now, but coal just hit an all-time high in the world. So the last complicating thing is society doesn't maximize for energy. Humans are biological organisms. We maximize for power. A tree doesn't produce one leaf, which would be 100% efficient, or a billion leaves, then they would be all shaded out. It produces an intermediate amount of leaves that give the most power for the investment of the tree's resources. And similarly, Teslas are wonderful machines, but the human drive for time, and time is money, if we have to stop and charge something, so there's a complex relationship between efficiency and energy. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. What about materials? So the red line shows global GDP, and the orange-yellow line shows the biophysical footprint of energy and GDP. Energy and GDP are energy, materials, and GDP. Energy and GDP are 99% correlated. Materials and GDP are 100% correlated. And the reason CO2 is increasing but at a lower rate is because we're growing CO2 faster than we're growing renewable energy faster than we're growing GDP, but they're still increasing. Energy and material requirements are incredibly tightly linked to economic growth. The technosphere, which is our buildings, our structures, our highways, all of the things that humans have ever built, including plastics, now outweighs all living things on Earth. Not animals, but trees, grassland, everything alive now weighs less than all the human structures. So if we try en masse to decarbonize our economies, this is going to lead to a massive rematerialization. This graph shows high risk levels for already wet bulb temperatures, climate change impacts in countries around the world that already have civil strife, economic problems, and are reacting to climate change. These are the countries where lithium, cobalt, nickel, neodymium, and other rare earths that are needed for a decarbonization reside, and this is a problem for electrification. So this graph on the right shows Chile, which is the world's largest country of producing copper. And the blue shows how much copper production increase they had from the prior year. And the red shows how much energy production increase they had in the prior year. So materials themselves are a constraint for that require more energy. So in the United States, in the 1800s, we had copper ore that was 40% copper. In the early 1920s, it was 4% copper, and now it's 0.4% copper. So we need to have 10 times the overburden that needs energy processing to get the same amount of actual useful copper. So energetic remoteness is the phenomenon by which everything in society gets more costly as energy costs go up, and everything we do will become more expensive if we can't reduce the energy consumption of industrial processes faster than prices grow. What about technology? Many of you are technologists. Technology is super, super important to our current lives and our future. Every unit of GDP, for sure, requires three things: energy, materials, and information, or technology. There are two types of technology. Type 1 is we find ways to use energy more efficiently, or we find new energy sources, like new ways of converting solar panels into electricity or making a coal plant more efficient. Type 2 energy increases demand for energy via doing more tasks that humans used to do manually, or like our cell phones and apps, things that we never had before. This type 2 is dominating the technological inventions. So what ends up happening is we're building a larger baseline for energy demand in the next period. But humans are innovators, and we are clever, and we have reduced the amount of energy to produce $1 of GDP consistently over time. So we get around 1.2% more efficient every year for the last 200 years. That's the declining line. However, the backfire effect is when something makes things cheaper, but that has a backfire effect that we actually use more because of that. So as I said the other day, for those of you that were in the talk with Jeff, energy efficiency has increased 36% since 1990, but energy consumption globally has increased 63%. What about money? Economic textbooks teach us that money is lent from existing capital. The reality is that 80% of the money is lent into existence. Banks don't lend money, they create it. And that is increasingly taken over by central banks, but commercial banks still do this. If Jeff, I'm sure you're in the audience, or Will, starts a company and they get credit approval from the bank, $1 million goes into Will's account, and an IOU is on the bank's account. From a financial vantage point, from a narrow boundary lens, the same amount of assets and liabilities exist in the world. From a biophysical standpoint, there are more financial claims on the same amount of oil, copper, forest, dolphins that existed 10 minutes before. So this is a disconnect that we are literally creating money in a balanced way in the financial system, but from an ecological system, we're creating more claims on a shrinking amount of biophysical reality. So this is a conceptual graph that shows historically over time humans expanded around the world, and we reached a maximum scale of what we could do with the sustainable flows of the sun, the rain, and the soil. Then we started to find non-renewable things, like oil, for example, and those things follow a different sort of curve, a Gaussian or a normal distribution, where they start slow and there's a peak and then there's a decline. Like carbon pulse would be one such curve. Then we have another curve we lay on top of it, which is more and more money, not tethered to these other things. And so with access to these incredibly powerful flammable fossils, our global economic system grew so fast and large that the prior economic rules of capital and labor no longer sufficiently explained our wealth and success. And using the social construct of credit, we're pulling resource consumption forward in time. Now our world and our society view the circumstances that we find ourselves in solely through a financial lens. Not only have we financialized the human experience, but also the explanation of it. So we don't think of it this way, but all of the money in your pocketbooks or in your bank accounts, when you spend it, it will be a claim on something require energy. When we take on debt as a nation or as a company, the debt will have to be paid back in the future of energy. And what we're doing is we're increasing our money very rapidly. We're over 35 trillion in debt in the United States. This year was a growing economy, and we had massive budget deficit because we're printing money to maintain our consumption levels. Meanwhile, the energy and ecology stuff wanes. Okay, what about pollution? We are alive at a time when we're having a massive impact on nature, and this is probably the most depressing part of my talk, but I think we have to be aware of it. This is why I quit Wall Street, because I care about the natural world. I care about the 10 million other species that we share the world with, and all of my work has been directed towards defending what is sacred on this earth. I just now know we can't do it directly because it's a really complex Rube Goldberg machine, our economy, which I'm trying to explain. So many people think correctly that we are nearing a 500 million year low in CO2 and in temperature. This is correct. During this low CO2 period is when most of the species on Earth and the massive boost in life have happened on this planet. So if now we're going to zoom in on the last 500,000 years, this is temperature here, and we had wild swings, like 5 or 6 degrees Celsius swings over these hundreds of thousands of years. Now we're in a different scale here. This is the Holocene. In no fewer than 7 places around the world, 10,000 years ago, the climate warmed and stabilized, and humans stopped hunter-gathering and become more agricultural, sedentary, and didn't move around as much. Fast forward here, this is the last 100-some years, and we are now approaching the warmest times in the last 500,000 years, and it's expected to be much higher, as many of you know. This is a risk to, if we go to 3 degrees Celsius, which personally I don't think we will, but I don't know, I don't think anyone knows, we will lose half the species on Earth. Prior mass extinctions shown in green, the purple shows prior carbon pulses. Carbon pulses happened in the past from volcanic provinces. Giant, like in continent-sized volcanoes would spew ash for thousands and tens of thousands of years. And what ended up happening because of the CO2 pulses from that is we had massive die-offs. Could you go back one? Sorry, I hit the, thank you. The green is the number of families on the Earth that the species declined. So now we are not volcanoes, we are Volvos and vacations, and we are emitting this carbon at this fastest time in history. What we're doing in 100 years, what took these lava basalts to do in 10,000 years. This is a global temperature anomaly chart since 1970 by month. Compared to the baseline of 1850 to 1900, you can see what's happening and you can feel what's happening in your own lives the last couple years. The oceans are not often talked about. We've lost the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. It has declined by 15% in the last 30 years because of the meltwater from Greenland. We have ocean acidification. We're losing ocean oxygen content. The average ocean oxygen content is down 2% in the last 30 years. There are lots of ocean issues, and most of us don't think or care about the ocean because it's out of sight, out of mind. The real stock market has been crashing for the last century and picking up speed the last couple decades. We share this earth with around 10 million estimated species. and the numbers don't look great. The average abundance of wild animal populations has declined 73% since 1970. There's some uncertainty there because we don't have enough scientists like going out and counting everything, but many are in decline. In North America, not as much. South America, Latin America, Asia, really precipitous declines. So 100,000 years ago, it's estimated that that amount was the weight of the biomass of wild animals. Now today, wild animals are a tiny fraction of that on the bottom right. Our livestock are that much, and humans ourselves are that much. So two things is the ratio of humans versus the rest of life has changed. And the other thing is the entire thing is boosted dramatically. Why? Because of the additional growing potential that we get from fertilizers and nitrogen and that comes from Haber-Bosch and all the benefits of fossil fuels that we're adding to our food system. We're losing insects between 1% and 2% a year, trillions of tiny robots doing tasks that humans could not do without them. Because we're losing insects, we're losing birds, especially grassland birds that depend on insects for food. A lot of this has to do with habitat loss and expansion of the economic system, but increasingly a lot of it has to do with chemical pollution. Sperm count and toxicity are in decline. I'm good friends with Shauna Swan. We're having another podcast coming up. We're losing sperm count at around the same rate. Globally, not just humans, it is a global thing, and it's believed this comes from phthalates that are outgassing from our plastic bottles and other things like that, and the pesticides and things that are on our fruits and vegetables. We don't really know, but we do know that it's harder and harder for people to have children. It's 1 in 7 people in the world right now cannot conceive if they want to. Okay, feelings. Why do we do all this? We are a product of the tree of life. Humans are a relatively new invention of the tree of life. We've been a modern species for 300,000 years. We're related to every single creature on Earth. We in this room are 99.9% plus genetically related to each other, no matter what race, color, or country you come from. We're 99% related to other apes. 90% related to cats, believe it or not. 85% related to mice, 80% related to cows, 60% to flies, 60% to chickens, where 50% of our DNA has the same signatures as mushrooms. We go through our lives matching the successful emotional states of our ancestors that go way back. We wake up in a modern world and we try to get status and try to get resources in a very technological, dense smorgasbord, which is very different than our ancestral environment. Someone doing a successful crypto trade gets the same area lighting up in his prefrontal cortex as one of our Pleistocene ancestors bagging a gazelle or such. Sexual selection in many cases has been a stronger driver than actual natural selection. A male peacock grows these fancy feathers. He has 3 drawbacks from that. He is more visible to a predator. If a predator sees him, he's less likely to get away, and it takes a lot of resources to grow those feathers. But all of those were evolutionary selected for the female's preference for such ornate display. And the same thing happens in human economies. Tiger Woods pulls into a marina and his ex-wife's boyfriend's yacht is a little bit longer than his, and you can imagine how he felt despite being a billionaire. Dr. Rock told me the other day that the single biggest behavioral prediction of humans is conforming to what other humans do or avoiding not doing what other humans do. We have supernormal stimuli where we get the rewards in an evolutionary sense by doing things that are uncorrelated with our success. We have a lot of young people that are playing games and their brains think that they just bagged a gazelle and are bringing it back to their tribe, but they're actually playing a game on their mom's basement accessing a cold fire server. So we live in a consumer culture and our circuitries are hijacked and they lead to motivations and actions being disconnected from the rewards. So this is a graph adapted from Robert Sapolsky that when we do a behavior, we want something, and the wanting is what boosts the dopamine, not the having. Once we have it, we don't get the dopamine, which is a motivational reward. And so there's so many things in our life that we get without doing the work, like stock options or pornography or gambling, or all of these things give us benefits without the intimacy and the natural human connections that come with it. And so what ends up happening is the wanting becomes stronger than the having. The picture on the right is a picture of my storage unit, which is a perfect example of the ghost of dopamine past, of the things that I wanted in the past. And for 10 years, I've gone in a couple times, but it's on my list to go and clean out. But we want all this stuff, and once we have it, then we want something else. This is my storage unit, but that is a microcosm for our global economic system. Our brains are flow-based, but our world is stock-based. We also are a mismatch from our ancestral times, where the virtual world in our brains can imagine millions of times more concepts and sentences than can exist in the real world. So we have a mismatch between fantasy and reality, and since we're not trained in ecology and all these systems, someone can utter a sentence that grammatically makes sense, but it biophysically is delusional, and this happens every day in the media. We are intensely social creatures. We protect our in-group, we ostracize out-groups. This is in all of us. This is one of the bigger reasons that oxytocin is a big driver. We quickly and strongly form groups, and we defend and support our groups. Humans are ultra-social. We are among the most social species in the world, and our behaviors are plastic, and we mirror others to an amazing degree. The good news is here that cultural evolution can happen at lightning speed versus biological evolution, and we are a very culturally plastic species. We don't need all this energy and stuff to be happy. We just want to conform with other people. There are different ways of living with different resource footprints. Okay, how do I connect these things into the economic superorganism story? How do I connect all these pieces? You've seen these murmurations of starlings. They follow 3 simple rules. Do what your neighbor does, don't get too close, fly towards the center, and the emergent property of those rules are these beautiful murmurations in the sky. Our ancestral humans also followed 3 simple rules. Coordinate with your tribe members to acquire surplus, eat the surplus, and do what's best for the tribal unit. But modern humans, these are the rules we follow. Coordinate towards acquiring surplus. At an individual level, at a family, at a small business, at a corporation, at a nation state, spend the surplus, pursue culturally accepted behavior. And this is the emergent property that has resulted from following these rules in this unique time in history. This is an aerial view of Tallahassee, Florida. This is an aerial view of Los Angeles. And the brake lights and the headlights of these cars and trucks are not too dissimilar than the veins and the arteries of a human body. And the hemoglobin, in this case, is the gas and diesel powering these vehicles. And this is the global economic transport system. So our culture keeps score of this stuff by GDP or GWP globally. Global human culture is functioning as an energy dissipating structure, a blind, amorphous amoeba that doesn't care and doesn't have morals and doesn't have values. It's just crawling forward, trying to get energy to keep all the structures that has been built flowing. So a hypothetical benevolent alien looking at Earth would talk about the global metabolism, and there is very little dissimilarity between our energy use and all of the climate meetings that have happened the last 40 years. This is a graph from one of my academic papers. Nature, the Earth's sink capacity, does not differentiate between humans and our metabolic machines. Earth is being pushed beyond the limits of our regenerative capacity, from supporting 1 billion humans 100 years ago to supporting 8 billion humans plus the metabolic equivalent of almost 500 billion humans. Climate change does not care about nations. It actually doesn't care about anything at all. It just responds to the thermal heat imbalance. So the global north has actually been reducing coal consumption, but the global south, and you can't blame them, are increasing coal at a dramatic way. So net, we've added more coal capacity in the world and just hit an all-time record. Trying to mitigate climate change within existing economic structures in our global economy is like arguing with a forest fire. There is no one driving the bus, not politicians, not the rich or powerful. I know this from personal experience, talking to senators and congressmen and billionaires. They all see and feel this, but as individuals, they're powerless to change it. So in my work, I often use metaphors from the Lord of the Rings. So this is the Tower of Sauron, and what we did 10,000 years ago is we departed from 290,000 years of hunting and gathering because we found agricultural surplus. That created hierarchy, and it started us on this path. Then a few hundred years ago, we found the flammable fossils underground. Then we had digital and linen money that we created, which exponentiated all this. And now we're using artificial intelligence to accelerate all these things. But the superorganism in this story is the Eye of Sauron. This is important, and I know some people in the audience might not like to hear this, but in the same way that shale oil is a larger straw to draw down oil faster, AI is going to globally act like a larger straw on the ecology and ecosystems of Earth. Because if AI manifests in the way that people expect and hope, it's going to make all the processes in dealing with extraction, mechanization, production, pulling out minerals of the earth more efficient. We're going to find more, we're going to add more, and that productivity is going to get fed back into the system. So from a micro standpoint, AI makes a hell of a lot of sense, and it's going to make this company more profitable. From a macro standpoint, it's a larger straw on a finite earth. So under this framing, under this superorganism framing, what is not likely to happen? Growing the economy and mitigating climate change, growing the economy by replacing fossil fuels with renewables, culture en masse, choosing to leave fossil carbon in the ground, governments embracing limits to growth before limits to growth are passed. Under this framing, what is likely to happen? Growth in the gross energy, while the net after energy costs are included, declines. Massive monetary creation and financial support by central banks and governments, wider and deeper poverty and inequality globally and within countries. AI is going to accelerate the energy and environmental problems because we're going to have more and more demand for energy. A rightward shift in politics, a reduction in global environmental regulations, and pedal to the metal until our system hits a wall. Okay, implications and scenarios from that foundation. So there are broadly four categories of the future. This one we could call green growth, where we use technology and hopefully different governance models or something, and we're so productive and so wealthy that we can allocate some of the surplus from that technology to heal the environment and bring people out of poverty, et cetera. This is the green growth story. The second is what I call the Mordor economy, which is as we grow and try to kick all the cans possible to continue to grow, we're going to allocate more and more of our energy and our materials to the energy and materials sector. So some of you might be thinking, why the heck did Jeff Rosenthal invite a Malthusian to this conference? And I'm going to explain that. So this far red line here was when Reverend Thomas Malthus lived on the earth, and he infamously predicted that the linear production of food would be outstripped by the geometric production of humans and humans' demand. He was wrong, because then we found fossil fuels. And instead of farming horizontally, we started to farm vertically. Fast forward to 1969, Paul Ehrlich infamously predicted similar things. He was wrong, because he did, at least about that. He didn't know about outsourcing to countries with lower cost production, nor did he know about debt, which allows us to pull resource consumption forward in time. In 2009, we had a great financial recession, and the central banks took over the role of money creation from the commercial banks. And this was another bootstrap that pulled us out. In 2020, we had COVID. Again, more guarantees and stimulus bazookas from governments, more debt, etc. There may be more cans to kick. Maybe AI will boost our productivity. I don't know. No one knows. But I do know this, that the rule of 70, if you take 70 and divide it by a growth rate, you figure out how many years is the doubling. If we grow at 3% a year, which is what most governments in the world expect, we will double the energy and materials that our world uses in the next 30 years. And we'll double them again in the 30 years after that. So a 10-year-old today, by the time they're 70, there will be a quadrupling in energy and material use on this planet. Is that desirable? Is it possible? What happens if that happens? What happens if that doesn't happen? These are questions we should be considering. So the Mordor economy is where we spend more and more of our resources towards the building of the Tower of Sauron, and probably spending more resources into mitigating environmental damage. The third category, which is the name of my podcast and the name of my work, is the great simplification. Because as humans no longer have ample supplies of energy at an affordable scale, to build complexity in the world, we're going to have to do the inverse, which is simplify, a simplified relative today economic system. And the word great is because it will be one of the greatest events in human history. This is a baseline of what I think could happen is as we boost renewables, we're going to have to go back to solar inputs. There's going to be lower productivity resources, which are more costly. And eventually, we're not going to be able to access the bank account by getting more credit. In some scenario like this in GDP, akin to the 1930s, I believe is going to happen likely in the next decade, maybe beyond then, but I believe this is quite likely. The fourth scenario is Mad Max, which we've seen movies about, and I don't need to describe. So this is kind of the cultural, how we think about these things in terms of percentages. Most of our dialogues are about this size, this story, and these other three things are quite small. In my eyes, this is a more likely distribution of these outcomes. So in the next decade, we have 5 horsemen, which I'll briefly overview. One is a financial bend versus break moment. In the past 10 years, government debt has grown 60%, corporate debt 50%, household debt 40%. We used to have this period where debt would grow very small, and now it's growing very fast. So we're creating debt. We're doubling our debt every 8.5 years, and we're doubling our GDP every 25 years, which is the income stream needed to service the debt. So we're stretching this tether to biophysical and ecological realities. We don't think of it this way, but all this debt in the future will have to be paid with energy. There is no credible institution or corporation globally that is specifically planning for an end to growth. They're all following this red dashed line. And this is one of Will's fancy slides he created for us with oil declining and money increasing. We are papering over our problems with more and more credit while the energetic and material basis for our currencies deplete. Second is geopolitics. This morning, President Biden announced that he's allowing Ukraine to use longer-range missiles into Russia. There are serious geopolitical problems between the United States, the UK, and the rest of the world. We're headed from a unipolar to a multipolar world. How can we do that without war? A lot of the resources, the BRICS nations control 50% plus of the exportable oil in the world, as one example. We have global choke points. This is the Strait of Hormuz, where 1/3 of the world's oil every day comes through that tiny 2-mile wide gap. I really wasn't going to include this, but I'm including everything else, so why not? But 50 years ago, everyone was worried about nuclear war. Now everyone's worried about climate change, and they don't talk about nuclear war. If there was a nuclear war, depending on how big it was, and a strategic exchange between Russia and the US would be a massive one. The amount of soot and everything thrown into the atmosphere, this is the drop in temperature that would happen over the number of years. So this is one way that we will not increase temperature on the planet, but it would destroy most complex life, and it would be the absolute worst case of all outcomes. Complexity. We live in a 6-continent just-in-time supply chain, and all of our active pharmaceutical ingredients, 85% of them in the United States come from India and China. It is an incredibly fragile just-in-time system based on the cooperation, cheap energy, and available credit from the past. The social contract, you'll recognize this from last week. Oh, so I misspoke. I did add one slide after the election. This is the county-by-county results of last week's election. And what's happening now is, as things get worse, people kind of blame who's in power. Every governing party facing election in developed countries this year lost vote share to the other party. This is the first time this has ever happened. And then, of course, I don't think for this crowd I need to just say this, but there is drought, there are fires, there is heat waves, and there are floods, this higher standard deviation of events. The United States is somewhat isolated from this, but in other areas of the world, this is happening now, and it's extreme. Okay, summary and main points. Long-term growth was not the norm. We're all alive at this really unique period and a special set of circumstances. Humans had flat periods or declining periods of growth for very long periods of time. Cheap, abundant fossil fuel energy underpins our societies and our expectations. This is a stock that our cultural stories treat as if it's a flow. We have conflated the proximate drivers of our progress and growth with the ultimate drivers. We tell stories about politics and technology and money, while neglecting the fact that all of this sits on a giant pyramid of mostly hydrocarbons that come from the past, and all of that sits on a functioning biosphere that we are now leaving the stability of the Holocene because of human impact. As long as growing GDP is the global goal, better technology at a macro level will tend to grow, not shrink CO2 emissions. My belief is the real energy transition is not about swapping the bad energy for good energy, but it's changing our relationship with energy, changing our relationship with others, changing our relationship with the natural world. It's how much energy we use, not what kind. Barring a new boost in productivity, maybe from AI, maybe from some new invention that hasn't come, growth is likely soon over, and the first challenge will be responding to this rubber band thing because of all of our financial claims. Rather than choose austerity, governments and central banks will print and monetize debt, leading eventually to currency debasement. This is important. We do not face a resource shortage, but rather a longage of expectations. The average person in America consumes 215,000 kilocalories worth of energy in our lights, in our planes, in our cars, but our bodies only need 2,000 or 3,000 in my case. This is me reading a story to my dog. This is me and my 2 college friends. This is me earlier this year teaching bird calls to a bunch of 6-year-olds in India, some other pictures from India. After basic needs, the best things in life are free. We don't need all this energy to be happy and healthy. Renewables, nuclear technology are the right answers, but they're the right answers to the wrong questions. The wrong question is, how do we continue this 19 terawatt, which is 190 billion light bulbs turned on 24/7, metabolic system? The right question is, how do we sustain human culture and the natural world for hundreds of years and beyond, using our technology, using our resources? Of course, we all in this room probably want that, but we have downward causality from the economic superorganism, which is why I'm doing this work, so we have more conversations about this. There's a biophysical phase shift occurring in global politics, alliances, and agreements. Climate change is not the problem, but is a symptom of a much larger dynamic. For those of you that saw the movie Don't Look Up, you'll recognize this scene. This complex predicament that I'm telling you today cannot yet be voiced aloud in politics and media. There was a section in Jared Diamond's book, Collapse, where he talked about cognitive dissonance, that there was a dam that was about to break, and people 3 miles downstream were worried, and people 1 mile downstream were really worried. But people that lived right under the dam didn't have any concern at all. And this is called cognitive dissonance, because for them to express concern, it would be too much of a clash with their built identity, their plans, their existing behaviors. And I think this is a microcosm for what our society faces. Our current resource tech situation can power a great culture and civilization, just not this one. Okay, what to do at various scales. So there's 5 general worldviews of people. I'm making this up, but I think it makes sense. Most people in the world are just worried about tomorrow. The future to them is just an extrapolation of yesterday. I need to feed my family. A lot of people don't think about the future at all. The future is going to look much like the past, only shinier. They don't really think about it. Some people are becoming aware of the deleterious impacts of our current capitalist growth-based system, and they're advocating, because of the disaster for the natural world, they're advocating for degrowth, for a shrinkage of the world economy actively. There are other people who understand that degrowth would be really bad, and so they're advocating for continuation growth, and we're going to power through it and innovation will solve something. I'm arguing that growth will no longer be available to us for much longer, and that degrowth unplanned would be very bad. And so we need to start having conversations about bending, not breaking, our society and our world. But even if you get through those 5 things, what do people care about? Even if you understood and believed everything I've told you so far, and I ask that you don't believe it, I ask that you think, what if what you just said is 10% possible or 20% possible? What would it mean for your lives and your companies and your plans? And I expect and hope you all do your own research to verify or dispute the things that I've said. But we care about different things. Some people care about the rich, well-off countries and people. Others care about materially poorer countries and people. Others care about other species and ecosystems. And others care about the unborn of human and other species. So this is a question on what we care about. So keep in mind that most of our science and our technological expectations were developed during this anomalous period, where we're at this juncture between the yellow and the red star. So I think there isn't one answer to the future, and I don't even like to use the word solutions. I prefer responses. And I think there's 3 distinct timelines for responses. One is right now in this pre-Great Simplification time, where we prepare at multiple scales. We also, in the second time, we have to stabilize society when this financial comeuppance occurs. And that's a whole lot of categories that I don't have time to get into today, but we discuss in the podcast. And then, how do we live? How are we going to live the next 100 years? What are the sustainable practices that aren't just flash in the pan or go away, but actually help humanity in the biosphere? These are different categories. We have a road closed sign in front of us as a culture. But if we imagine a time machine, because humans have steep discount rates, we care about the present more than the future. And so if you understand that, you can imagine that as a society, we're not likely to do major things ahead of a future crisis. So if we imagine a time capsule, what are the things that we are going to need at that moment, and what can we do now to prepare for them? So the next section of this presentation is the ocean of human and planetary futures. I use the word innovators to represent you all. I know you're founders and CEOs and technologists and and dreamers and artists and all kinds of things. I'm just for now using the word innovators. What should innovators do? Well, there's a lot of things that are not up to you. There's things upstream from your companies and your behaviors, upstream of investing in innovation. We need some sort of global and national governance. We need to change the global conversation somehow. That's a big category. We need an alternative goal to just more and more stuff. How many people ask, what is GDP for? This chart shows on the bottom is the energy supply in gigajoules per capita, and on the left scale is the Human Development Index. And you can see that if you're very poor, either as a person or a country, you get massive development and personal benefits from an increase in energy. But once you get to around 100 gigajoules per capita, it flatlines. You don't get much more development benefits. So what is GDP for? And maybe we're going to eventually have to have something that goes beyond GDP. So we get back to the hats. The superorganism, the economic superorganism that I've outlined, has created walls for you and other humans to be your best selves, because you're in this rat race to do the pressures of your job and your responsibility and paying your bills and getting the social acceptance and status, when you really want to do that and be a good family person, enjoy your life, and do the right thing for the future. The prices are wrong. We're paying pennies on the dollar for things that took millions of years to sequester. If we had a tax, not only on carbon, but on all non-renewable inputs, and we would have things that are renewable have no tax, this would massively change our economic system. Things would be a lot more expensive that were energy intensive, but it would send the right signals to innovators to conserve the resources that are finite, and it would send the right signals to consumers. My cell phone might be $3,000 or $4,000, so I would really take care of it. This is possible. The prices that we pay are just to maximize power and consumption. And lastly, we need a bend, not break category of inventions that I've started calling advanced policy, which is needed during this bend, not break period. Advanced policy are those things that are too politically or socially awkward and unpopular to say now, but we need to build constituency and understanding about them and build scenarios at a government level to prepare for these events. Governance, incentive prices, advanced policy. Okay, so what about downstream from you, from innovators? Well, we need to have a cultural conversation about comparing ourselves based on how much consumption instead of how good of people we are, how good our moral compass is, how much we help our community. Instead of comparing ourselves on speedboats or new houses, we have to change our cultural backbone on that stuff. We have to decide what is sacred in our world and which areas of our natural world are off limits to the superorganism. We have to have a conversation that after basic needs are met, most of the best things in life are free. I asked on the Friday session with Jeff, your best 5 experiences in your life, how many of them required a lot of money and a lot of energy? Probably very few. This is a picture of the Cave of the Hands, which is around 12,000 years old. There have been many social contracts in humanity's past. Syntagma Square, the Magna Carta, the US Constitution. Humans have changed their social agreements based on the circumstances of their time. And it is my hope that culturally some sort of a mitochondria or some small organelle that provides energy to the whole thing replaces the superorganism in the coming century. Okay, so what about innovation? What do we do with this backdrop? First of all, we talk about technology. What are the best 4 inventions ever by humans? I would argue is the bicycle, the story, golden retrievers or dogs generally, and music. And so we need to differentiate between clever and wise when we think about human innovation and technological invention. What technologies might be most suitable for the downslope of the carbon pulse? And I'm not saying that that's happening right this second. It might be 10 or 20 years from now. I don't think so. I think it's closer to now. But regardless, this is a relevant question. Goldilocks technology is not too hot and not too cold. Goldilocks technology, too hot might be some drone that drops off cupcakes at your child's birthday party, and too cold would be a Stone Age tool. We need things in the middle. So here's a framework, because I know many of you are investors and founders and innovators. So what sort of framework would be under Goldilocks technology? We have to be conscious of energy inputs and really understand this dynamic in your future inventions. We have to be conscious of ecological impacts and what carbon and other pollutants are our processes emitting. We have to use simpler inputs as opposed to complex ones. Lithium is great. It's about the best chemical for batteries, but is it affordable, scalable for all the humans in the future, plus when we rebuild the cars? Sodium, not as good, but much more plentiful and simpler. Shorter supply chains. We have a massively long supply chain. In the United States, it takes 1,500 miles for your Caesar salad to arrive at your plate. So we're going to have to nearshore more, localize and regionalize supply chains. A higher percentage of circularity. As our complexity reverses, we're going to have more circularity where the inputs can be used again and again instead of just discarded. Right now, only 8% of materials in the world are recycled in our consumption, only 8%. We need to have things that are more regenerative. We're drawing down the ancient carbon account. Humans are also using 40% of the net primary productivity of the planet and leaving the 60% to the other 10 million species. There are regenerative technologies. This is not the right image perhaps, but they parachute beavers into landscapes, and the beavers cut down and redo things and regenerate the water flows. And there's all sorts of regenerative technology, some using AI, that is net positive for the planet. Technology, a lot of technology is like, what a great idea, but is it affordable and scalable to the masses? And is the technology that you might invent relevant to the third category, the great simplification? We're going to have to do all this simultaneously with the superorganism continuing its power and continuing its growth. We're going to have to build a Chinese wall and build all the stuff that I'm talking about simultaneously with this dynamic that will continue. What about individuals? You're all humans first before you wear these other hats. I think you're all very mature and wise and on the embodied things and meditation and yoga and all the things that I've seen at Summit. You're way more advanced than I am, and you probably don't want me giving you advice because I'm just trying to set the table of what our future faces. But I've been a college student, and these are some of the recommendations I tell to my students, and I hope they might be helpful. Avoid the consensus trance. We are such a other-regarding species that we look to others for direction. Have confidence in your own views and your own course. Don't leave home hungry. We live too much of our time right now in our sympathetic nervous system, and our parasympathetic nervous system is where we should spend most of our time. Food, exercise, sleep, peace, meditation, all that stuff. Make sure and prioritize your own health before you're doing your other work. And I have to take my own advice on that. We need, broadly, libraries of healing around the United States, around the world. People are really struggling now. And if you're a philanthropist or a business maker, how come we can't have libraries of healing, not only for books, but for actually doing the things that some of you are learning and applying from Summit in Corvallis, Oregon, or Topeka, Kansas. We really need those things to build social capital where we are. If you're hearing this story and you haven't heard it before and you're feeling a little sad and grieving, that is absolutely normal, and it's actually the appropriate response. And it gives you a moment to reflect, and I think many people are grieving after last week's election. many people are not. But when you grieve, it actually gives you a chance to recognize what's really important and what's sacred. And so grief, when hearing this story that might be different than our culture has told us, is actually the appropriate and healthy response. If you're dismissive or laugh at this, then I would be worried. Keep perspective. We're between the yellow and the red star on this. If I told you that I was going to set you on an ice floe with negative 20-degree weather by yourself, you would think that's a death sentence. But to an Inuit person, that's just like a normal day. So keep perspective of these things. And I think all of you here in Cabo already are doing this. Experience life in its fullest, because that's really important. And related to that is, oh my gosh, we are living at such an amazing time. Be grateful for all the things, all the people, all the connections that we have access to. Set unconditional goals. There are conditional goals you might set that might be disrupted depending on what happens in the world or who might be elected, but you can set an unconditional goal that no matter what happens in the world, you're responsible for, like planting a garden or starting a community or running a marathon. Inner tech, which again, I'm not the best person to talk about this stuff, but we need technology, but a lot of it has to do with how we go through our world in this total smorgasbord of dopamine availability, and we need to find ways to be healthy, holistic humans. And here's the thing, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know the energy, money, ecology story cold. I'm mostly curious about what it means to be human and how we can be satisfied and get our evolutionary neurotransmitters by simpler, less material ways. And I'm learning about that. Design and develop skills that are going to be relevant in a simpler future. Get more comfortable carrying dissonance. When the average person hears a story like this, their brain goes in two different directions. No, it can't be true. We're going to science it. We're going to innovate our way out of it. We always have. Or it's Mad Max. We're screwed. There's nothing we can do. And both of those are functionally equivalent in the brain because it feels uncomfortable to carry dissonance. It is physically uncomfortable. So we rationalize and come up to those conclusions. So my advice is we need to navigate the paths between fantasy and doom and become more comfortable with uncertainty. Find the others, which I think Jeff and his colleagues at Summit have helped you do. But the biggest thing that has helped me these last 20 years is I have certain groups of incredible friends that I work with on these things. And so my advice to you is we are all aboard a runaway train and our economic system is shoveling fuel into the engine. Find the dining car. Find people in different categories. Find people that you just like hanging out with. Find people that have meaning and purpose and care about the things you care about. Find people that you can work on these issues together. You might have 3 different groups or it all might be a group. But social interactions in small groups are where we are at our best and they're incredibly supportive. Recognize your absolute wealth right now instead of comparing it to others, because for most people, on an absolute basis, we're richer than kings and queens of old. And yet our bodies don't feel it because we're comparing ourselves to others. So be more comfortable about your absolute circumstances instead of comparing yourself. Be kind and bold, and boy, have I felt this the last couple days here. This is a unique group of beautiful humans. I only knew Jeff Rosenthal before I came here, and when you just walk up to someone, they come up to you and smile and greet you, and this if you dropped all of you in New York City, it would be a hell of an experiment, but there's so much negativity that passes on to the next person, and we can easily change that by how we interact with others, by smiling and helping and doing things. In the same way, think beyond the self. Do something for the benefit of someone else that nobody else, including that person or animal, will ever know. And this helps you understand your personal motivations. Are they altruistic or not? I train myself by doing this. I give $5 tip at Starbucks to the barista, but I wait until he or she is looking away and I put it in the cup. So no one sees me do it. And that's training me for these sorts of behaviors. Be a rock in the river. As our cultural water becomes quicker and faster and more water, a lot of people are going to be swept downstream. And so those of us that have psychological, physical, emotional, financial means and maturity have a responsibility to help where we are. And if there's enough of our rocks, we can actually change the direction of the water. Remember that everything is connected. We do not live in an individualistic, atomic world. The bees, the trees, the apples, humans, at what point does an apple become Nate? At what point does the pollination from a bee become the apple? We're connected to everything on Earth, and our economic system doesn't recognize that. I think we have to start recognizing it as humans. This gentleman is named DJ White. He was the co-founder of Greenpeace, and he runs an organization called Earth Trust. This is when he was 22 years old. He was a geologist and he lived in Indianapolis. He had one single passion. He was obsessed with cetaceans, dolphins and whales. But there are no dolphins and whales in Indiana, and he was a geologist. So he bought a one-way ticket to Hawaii, and he volunteered cleaning out aquariums with the dolphin poop and everything just to be closer to them. 15 years later, he was the single most successful environmental activist of our time. He stopped the only dolphin drive kill in Taiwan that people don't even know about today. He did the star-kissed dolphin-safe tuna. He has tons of environmental success stories that no one knows about because he doesn't care about his status. Here he's doing yoga with a dolphin that could choose among 100 pieces of music and always chose classical music with her nose, Bach or Beethoven, and she would direct him in the moves and play practical jokes on him, which is in our book. So he decided not to have children, but to reproduce other species with his time on Earth. He's one of my best friends. But my reason for sharing this is you don't have to know what you want to do the rest of your life. You don't have to have it all mapped out. Just take a step in the direction of something that feels real and important to you. We talk about driving and eating meat and having electric cars and all this stuff. The time now is not to minimize our 1/8 billionth part of the economic superorganism. The time now is to maximize our impact, which is why I flew from Minneapolis to here to pass the baton to more of you creative pro-social humans to integrate this into your thinking. So I think to shame people about eating too much or flying too much, as long as it's in service of life and this broader perspective, I think it's a good idea. So finally, we have arrived at a species-level conversation. We're the first of our species to be able to comprehend where we came from, how we got here, what we're doing, what our natural resource balance sheet is, what our impact on nature is, what we really need, and we can envision in our minds what future scenarios might be like. The battle of our time is no less than the battle between power and life on Earth. I'll leave you with a couple quotes. We have systematically misunderstood the nature of reality. Now we have reached the point where there's an urgent need to transform both how we think of the world and what we make of ourselves. The problem is that the very brain mechanisms which succeeded in simplifying the world so as to be subjected to our control militate against a true understanding of it. This is my friend Ian McGilchrist. He had a podcast with me and he's going to be on again soon. When a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order. Thank you all. Thank you.